Chapter 1, Am I a slut? Xiaolan Xia was woken up by crying. She remembered that she had just led her subordinates in completing a very difficult merger and acquisition deal, then attended the celebration party afterwards. Under the frequent toasting of her subordinates, Xiaolan had gotten quite drunk. However, she wasn't completely knocked out yet. On the way home, she could still hear her new assistant talking to her boyfriend on the phone. I'm sending Ms. Xia home, she lives alone, she's not married yet. You said Ms. Xia is a woman, what's the point of earning so much money if she didn't get herself married out? In her semi-drunken state, Xiaolan didn't confront her new assistant about it in person. No matter how successful her career was, a strong woman without the decoration of marriage would easily become the subject of gossip. Especially since Xiaolan had a strong personality at work and average looks. Some people at the company said behind her back that she was ugly, old, yet still picky. As if she could ever get married. Xiaolan didn't care that people talked about her personal life, but her new assistant had a loose tongue and slow wit. She actually thought Xiaolan was passed out drunk and dared to gossip about her boss right in front of her. She would have to transfer this assistant out in a couple days and find a new one. When she got home, the nanny Aunt Zhang chattered on, telling Xiaolan to drink less and take better care of herself as a woman. Xiaolan threw herself onto the soft big bed and fell asleep immediately. She had a strange dream where she became someone else. The setting was the 1980s. Some unpleasant things happened in the dream, and she got so mad that she rammed her head into a pillar. Xiaolan found it funny, she definitely wasn't the suicidal type. Based on her decades of experience clawing her way up, the things in the dream were nothing. But the dream was so vivid. There was a woman weeping softly by Xiaolan's ear, giving her a splitting headache. The blankets were also damp and uncomfortable for some reason. Xiaolan felt like she was being soaked in sweat. When she finally opened her eyes with great difficulty, she was startled by a dark yellow face. Xiaolan, you're awake? You foolish girl, you're going to scare your mother to death. Woo-woo, Xiaolan, does your head still hurt? The dark yellow face, with a body so skinny it could be blown over by a gust of wind. Xiaolan thought, why isn't this dream ending yet? The woman's tears flowed down her face. Xiaolan, promise your mom, we won't do anything stupid anymore, okay? Xiaolan nodded blankly, and the woman wiped her tears with her sleeve, a hint of a smile appearing on her worried face. Let mom make you something to eat, just wait here. After the woman closed the door behind her, Xiaolan endured the headache to observe her surroundings. A black wooden bed, the straw mattress underneath rustled when moved even a little. The yellowed mosquito net was rolled up around the bed posts. The faded quilt had 4 patches on it. Beside the bed hung a thin rope connected to a simple electric lamp. Xiaolan gave the rope a tug, and the lamp turned on, probably not even 15 watts. The room was still very dark. Enduring the headache, she got out of bed. The only decent piece of furniture in the room was the dressing table by the window. The glass mirror reflected a small face, pointy chin, big eyes, straight nose, every feature exquisitely beautiful. A blood-soaked white bandage around her head added a touch of tenderness and fragility. Xiaolan gasped, this was the legendary fox-like beauty. Of course this wasn't her face. If Madame Xia had even 30% of this beauty, she wouldn't have people gossiping about her behind her back. Xiaolan smiled, and the girl in the mirror smiled back charmingly. Her eyes could melt one's heart. No matter how Xiaolan contorted her face into weird expressions, the face in the mirror still looked beautiful. This was just unfair. Xiaolan thought of her original plain-looking face, calling it average was flattering it. But the world wasn't all about looks. The higher you climbed, the more people valued your capabilities. However, Coming from a poor family without external help, her early struggles were very difficult. While she was painstakingly building her career, female sales representatives with pretty faces could get orders just by coquettishly asking. Xiaolan had to pull all-nighters to gain professional knowledge, yet couldn't even meet with a supervisor. If she had been slightly better looking, perhaps she wouldn't have needed to diligently struggle for 20 years before tasting success. She didn't get to enjoy the fruits of her labor, the houses, cars, savings, and position for long before falling asleep and somehow becoming another Xiaolan Xia. This one lived in 1983 at the age of 18, blessed with an exquisite fox-like face, yet wanting to commit suicide by hitting a pillar for some reason. The original Xiaolan Xia seemed to have died. For unknown reasons, Xiaolan from 30 years in the future woke up in this body, with jumbled memories that nevertheless let her empathize deeply. Creak. The door was pushed open. The skinny and sallow-faced woman came in holding a chipped enamel cup. Xiaolan, Mom steamed eggs for you, eat while they're hot. The woman was exceedingly careful and even submissive. She was Xiaolan's mother, Fenlu. Xiaolan opened her mouth, but couldn't call out Mom. She didn't know how to act around Fen. From the memories, the original Xiaolan had a horrible attitude toward her. Should she continue being an unfilial daughter, or take this chance to say she had damaged her brain and decided to become a good daughter? Before Xiaolan could decide, the half-closed door was shoved open roughly. A few people crowded into the room, led by Xiaolan's grandmother. She was accompanied by 2 daughter-in-laws other than Fan, and a few grandchildren. They looked ready for a fight. Xiaolan's grandma, with the high cheekbones, had fire spewing from her eyes. She snatched away the enamel cup from Fan's hands, and even pushed her to the ground. You gave birth to a slutty whore who shamed our Xia family. You still dare to secretly steal eggs from home to feed her? Scolding her a few times, yet pretending to care after she hit a pillar. Do you think I'm that easily fooled? If you want to die, go die. Hitting a pillar is useless, you can still jump into the river. Her vicious tone was not the grandmotherly love it should have been, but more like Xiaolan's enemy. Fen crawled to Grandma's feet, clutching her pants and refusing to let go. Mother, the child only just woke up, please spare her life. Chapter 2, Then Throw Me Out. Madame Xia felt stifled. She didn't manage to call out Mom, but Lu Fen had knelt down to plead for her. She was now Xiaolan, having inherited the original's identity and most of her memories. But she felt aggrieved by the original's plight. Xiaolan had a fox-like beauty, yet was an empty-headed vase. Her every frown and smile contained charm. In the 1980s, she would be called loose. Country folk didn't use such fancy words. They described Xiaolan with one term, slutty. Because of her looks, Xiaolan's reputation had never been good. And she had stolen her cousin Xia Ziyu's fiancé, brazenly taking off her clothes in broad daylight to seduce her future brother-in-law. Not only was she drowned in the villager spit, even her own family couldn't tolerate her anymore. But the matter of stealing someone's lover could still be arguable. That incident of stripping naked in daylight to seduce her future brother-in-law never happened. Yet no one would believe her. Some even swore they saw Xiaolan frolicking naked with the local riffraff in the grass. Rumors spread through the village and even to places miles away. With Xiaolan unable to defend herself and her family adding fuel to the fire, she finally chose to commit suicide by hitting a pillar. Having seen much of the world, Madame Xia knew there were many miscarriages of justice. How could she interfere in every case? But now she had become Xiaolan, and refused to bear this false accusation. Her family all had ferocious expressions, wanting to hound her to death. The woman kneeling on the ground was the body's birth mother, and the one who had loved the original most in the Xia family. Madame Xia decided not to endure this. "Mom, get up first." She pulled the kneeling Lu Fen up with great effort. Lu Fen didn't struggle, afraid of hurting her daughter's injury. Calling out Mom wasn't as difficult as she'd imagined. There were two things Madame Xia envied most about Xiaolan. First, she was exquisitely beautiful. Second, she had a doting mother. Madame Xia's parents had died when she was little, so she never enjoyed such familial love. She was Madame Xia, the successful businesswoman. She was also Xiaolan from the 1980s, who committed suicide over rumors. With no choice, the two identities could only merge into one. "Xiaolan, listen to your mother and admit your mistake to Grandma." Lu Fen's face was full of sorrow. She always bore grievances from Grandma, aunts, husband and daughter, preferring to be obedient and forgiving. But no one in the Xia family appreciated this. The more she endured, the more they bullied her. The original Xiaolan wasn't any better on this count. But Grandma Xia started screaming, "I don't have a slutty whore for a granddaughter. Shameless little bitch, even trying to steal Ziyu's man." Xiaolan felt her temple pulsing. As she rose higher in her career, it had been years since she directly confronted low-class shrews like this. But Xiaolan's skills in tearing apart pretty saleswomen and punching debtor suppliers were still there. "Grandma!" she shouted with all her might, finally temporarily suppressing Grandma Xia. "You don't recognize me as a granddaughter, yet I still call you Grandma. I'm full of feelings for the old Xia family. With you calling me a slut and whore, aren't you waiting for the villagers to watch our family drama? My reputation is already ruined, but the sisters in our family still need to marry outright? Being sisters with a slut isn't very glorious, is it?" Xiaolan truly didn't understand why they didn't care about strategy when showing blatant favoritism. Hurting the enemy yet damaging yourself even more, why couldn't the family unite against outsiders to stomp her to death? In the countryside, with Xiaolan's reputation in tatters, which of the unmarried Xia girls could hold their heads high? Grandma Xia was temporarily rendered speechless, and third aunt's expression was also unpleasant. The family's three oldest girls, Xia Ziyu was 20 and not only got into college, but also found a perfect match. Xiaolan was 18 and looked to be hopeless. Third aunt's eldest daughter was already 17 and soon to be married. Third aunt really hated Xiaolan down to her bones, yet had to keep her voice down and grit out. "You still have the nerve to mention this. It's all been delayed by you, why don't you just die?" Xiaolan's cousin Xia Hongxia also looked at her resentfully from behind her mother, raring for a fight. Lu Fen's face was red with anger. "Sister-in-law, Xiaolan just woke up." Lu Fen's thin body shielded her daughter. She wanted to argue, but was timid by nature. When bullied, she couldn't speak coherently. Xiaolan gently pulled Lu Fen behind her. "Don't worry, I won't argue with them. I'm reasonable." Grandma Xia truly wished she could strangle this shameless girl. Yet the girl didn't even know her own shamelessness, sweeping her gaze around the room with a smile instead. "I already hit a pillar, but Yanwang wouldn't take me. Now I plan to live well. I will live well. If anyone isn't happy with that, I'll make them unhappy first. You all say that everyone's unhappy with me staying home, so why don't I move out?" Move out? Where could she move to? Lu Fen panicked. What unmarried girl moves out of her family home? Xiaolan didn't die from hitting the pillar and was even harder to handle now, showing a ruthlessness that nearly suffocated Grandma Xia. But Xiaolan had never been docile. Grandma Xia was petty, third aunt mean, and Xiaolan wasn't easy to provoke either. Third aunt was eager for Xiaolan to disappear, to avoid shaming the family. Where could you move to? Don't tell me you want to hide at your grandmother's and come back after a few days. It was perfect for her to move out. The house was cramped, yet Xiaolan occupied a room alone. They could free up a room once she left. Third aunt sized up this shabby but clean room, planning for her daughter, Hongxia, to move in. Girls needed their own rooms when nearing marriageable age. Doesn't the family have an old house by the riverbank? One end of the village to the other. I'll live there, to avoid offending everyone's eyes. Xiaolan revealed her original plan. Grandma Xia refused to compromise. You're a disgrace. Letting you live instead of beating you to death was merciful enough, yet we still have to give you a room. Although the house by the river was dilapidated, full of mosquitoes in summer and freezing cold in winter. And it was next to the cow pen, so smelled terrible. Grandma Xia simply didn't want to agree too readily and let Xiaolan be too comfortable. She felt something had changed in Xiaolan after waking up. Still pestering unreasonably, but more tactfully. Grandma Xia was quite astute. She didn't want Xiaolan beyond her control. Xiaolan just smiled. Then I won't move. It's not bad staying home eating and drinking. My reputation is ruined anyway. I'll just happily stay an old spinster. Big sister is a precious college student. She wouldn't watch her little sister starve, right? Xiaolan was truly too difficult to handle. Even the previously silent eldest aunt was annoyed. Xiaolan wanted to rely on her daughter Ziyu? Sigh, I don't believe what others say. Xiaolan, you're just being stubborn with family right now. How will a grown girl live after leaving home? Let me persuade your grandma. Let's all take a step back and calm down. Eldest aunt pulled Grandma Xia outside, with third aunt following. The remaining younger generation all looked at Xiaolan with hatred. Lufan wept softly. Xiaolan sighed. Don't cry anymore. I can't survive staying home. Enduring humiliation, the Xiaos wouldn't actually kill her. But Xiaolan refused to endure. Getting reborn was a chance. Why live so stifled? Soon, Grandma Xia and the rest came back in. You can have the old house. Whether you live or die will have nothing to do with the Xia family. Xiaolan kept demanding more. Grandma Xia had no solution for this shameless girl, and finally threw her a small bag of sweet potatoes. Hurry and get lost. Chapter 3. I will seek justice for you. Please help me carry this. Xiaolan stuffed the bag into Lufan's arms. Lufan had tears all over her face. Xiaolan, how can you leave? What about when your dad comes back? Lufan didn't know how things had become like this. Although her daughter was not mistreated, she was driven out to live alone, equivalent to being singled out. For a teenage girl to be kicked out of home, how would she survive in the future? She wanted Xiaolan to admit her mistake, but was afraid to stimulate Xiaolan. Come live with me, we'll talk about it when my dad comes back. I can't cook and will starve to death alone. Xiaolan had no intention of abandoning Lufan alone. After she left, the Xia family would only bully Lufan even more harshly. She also counted on Lufan's soft-heartedness. She spoke firmly and wanted Lufan to leave with her. The Xia family didn't stop Lufan either, probably waiting for Xiaolan's father Xia Dejun to come back and settle the mother and daughter. There was a heavy rain. The county was worried that the flood would breach the river embankment in the neighboring township. They recruited young and middle-aged laborers to repair the embankment, so all the Xia family's men went. Lufan didn't have her own opinions. In a daze, she hugged the bag of sweet potatoes and followed along. When Xiaolan stepped out the door, she turned back and took away the porcelain bowl used to steam the eggs. Xiao's young grandson had been swallowing saliva looking at the steamed eggs. He didn't expect Xiaolan to take them away and immediately started crying non-stop. The room was filled with people, some scolding Xiaolan, some coaxing the child. It was chaotic. Once they got out the door, the fresh air suddenly swept up. Without smog or pollution, the clean sky from 30 years later, only those who came back knew how precious the clean air was. Xiaolan was instantly invigorated. The Xia family kicked up a row in broad daylight. Who knew how many families were eavesdropping for gossip? Seeing the mother and daughter, those people didn't hide. They pointed fingers at them openly. Of course, Lu Fen was ignored. Their main target was Xiaolan. Kicked out by your family? Deserved it. Even seduced her sister's husband. Rolled naked in the grass with the local punk from the neighboring village. Such a disgrace to the Xia family. Her sister got into college and see how slutty she is. When Xia Dejun comes back, he will beat her to death. Beaten and scolded already, she still doesn't change her slutty ways. Look how she walks, shaking her butt. Xiaolan really wanted to beat up those gossipy village women. Was she shaking her butt? She was just weak from hunger. These gossips ruined the good mood brought by the fresh air. Xiaolan looked at the surroundings, beautiful rural scenery. One could only appreciate it when materially well off. The countryside in 1983 only received praise from the native soil literature men of letters. At first glance, there were mostly mud houses, and very few red brick ones. The short buildings, the mud and brick walls were whitewashed, still with slogans written in red paint from 10 years ago. Stuck neither in the north nor south, in a remote inland province, a place the reform and opening up spring breeze couldn't reach, Day Village. The only way out of this environment was through studying. Her cousin had taken the right path. Xia Ziyu was the only college student in Day Village in the 30-plus years since the restoration of the college entrance examination after the founding of the country. It goes without saying that if Xiaolan hadn't changed, from the time cousin Xia Ziyu got into college, Xiaolan's life would have formed a huge and insurmountable gap compared to her. So what if she was schemed by Xia Ziyu? One was a female college student in the 1980s, with a bright future ahead. No wonder the whole family saw her as a golden phoenix. The other one had ruined her reputation, had no skills, and in the future, could only marry a widower or old bachelor. She wouldn't be the slightest help to the village woman. The difference between clouds and mud. No wonder the Xia family was so realistic, it was just human nature. For interest, the Xia family would unite and stand on Xia Ziyu's side. Xiaolan really didn't understand until her death. It was clearly a romantic relationship between socializing men and women, just short of piercing the window paper. It was her who encouraged that man to take the college entrance exam. She even humbly borrowed books from cousin Xia Ziyu for the man to study bitterly, and personally sent him to take the county exam. After the exam finished, nothing seemed amiss. But when the admission notice came, he had become Xia Ziyu's officially announced boyfriend? Was it because she was not worthy of Wang Jianhua? Choosing cousin was the right decision in the long run. College students matching college students was a perfect match made in heaven. But before you left, why did you have to trample on Xiaolan? How did those deadly rumors spread across the countryside? When Xiaolan went to ask Wang Jianhua for proof, she only found Xia Ziyu in Wang Jianhua's room. Xia Ziyu was more reasonable than Xiaolan. With just a few words, she made Xiaolan turn around and leave. On the road, she ran into the local punk from the neighboring village who had pestered Xiaolan before. This time he was bolder, and directly tore Xiaolan's sleeve. When Wang Jianhua and Xia Ziyu appeared together, Wang Jianhua seemed very disappointed in Xiaolan. He didn't listen to Xiaolan's explanation, but directly held Xia Ziyu's hand. Were those rumors spread by the local punk from the neighboring village? This was a strike-hard year. That punk could be shot dead in minutes. No matter, since she had been reborn in this body with the same name, the things Xiaolan didn't figure out, she would figure out, and seek justice for the original owner. The dilapidated old house by the river beach appeared in sight. The crooked fence gate didn't even have a lock. There were holes in the walls and roof. Lu Fen hugged the sweet potatoes in her arms, at a loss. This was not a place that could provide shelter from the wind and rain. Xiaolan, listen to your mother's advice. Xiaolan covered her head. Mom, my wound hurts again. She was getting more and more used to calling it. Lu Fen immediately shifted her attention. Did the wound split open? Let mother take a look. The door was unlocked. The room was messy. Only the bed frame was left. Lu Fen told Xiaolan to hurry up and eat the steamed eggs. The eggs were a bit fishy from cooling down. Xiaolan didn't want to eat alone either. She only ate half and said she was full. You eat the rest, or it will go bad tomorrow. Lu Fen held the porcelain pot, complicated emotions in her heart. This kind of thing had never happened before. Her daughter had smashed her head, and seemed to have learned to cherish others. Lu Fen felt gratified yet worried. Your dad will be back in a couple of days. Speaking of her husband, Lu Fen couldn't help but shrink her shoulders. She was scared to the bone. Chapter 4. People of the same clan with starkly different fates. Xiaolan's biological father, Xia Dejun, was an unreasonable man who preferred using his fists over words. Whether it was fighting over an irrigation ditch or farmland, Xia Dejun was strong and muscular. He was an obedient thug for the Xia family elders, ready to strike wherever directed. Xiaolan thought Xia Dejun was a brainless bludgeon, only caring about the greater family and neglecting his own. Among the three Xia brothers, Xia Dejun was second. He was the only one without a son. Xia Dejun felt losing face for not having a son. He often scolded and even beat Lu Fen when drunk. Even his own daughter Xiaolan was a bad investment in his eyes. Don't blame Xia Dejun for not having high hopes for Xiaolan. Aesthetics were limited in that era. Xiaolan was good-looking, but her enchanting looks only pleased young men. The older generation from boys' families didn't like Xiaolan's looks. She seemed unstable and would disturb family peace if married in. On the contrary, Xiaolan's cousin Xia Ziyu had a goose-egg face, big eyes, and thick brows, looking valiant and dignified. Who wouldn't say she looked like a good girl? Xiaolan was a dumb blonde. Xia Ziyu wasn't very smart as a child either. But after graduating middle school, she suddenly became enlightened and her grades kept improving. This year, she had actually tested into a university in Beijing. The Xia family had raised a golden phoenix. Xia Dejun looked down on his own daughter, but doted on his niece. The young and middle-aged Xias went to reinforce the river dams, also to earn living expenses for Xia Ziyu. Xia Ziyu took away over 500 yuan of the family savings to Beijing. The Xia family was afraid she would spend too much in Beijing, so the whole family worked like oxen to support university student Xia Ziyu. Meanwhile, Xiaolan had it rough. After smashing into the pillar, she didn't even go to the hospital. The barefoot doctor from the health center simply bandaged her wound. What a stark difference in fates for people of the same clan. Thinking of the original owner, Madame Xia felt like sighing. Her wise and virtuous cousin was really hard to deal with. Country folk didn't know better, but Madame Xia knew university had no tuition in this era. Instead, the state even gave a monthly living allowance to every university student. That was enough to support personal expenses. Bringing over 500 yuan to go to school in 1983 was absolutely the treatment of a white rich beauty. Xiaoziyu enjoyed the treatment of a white rich beauty, and Xiaolan didn't object. But having just seen the Xia family crowd, none were as thin as Lu Fen. She was so thin that one couldn't squeeze out a couple of tails of oil out of her. Yet Xiaoziyu's own mother also wore patched clothes, but had a ruddy complexion. Her hands weren't withered like Lu Fen's, covered in little cracks. The ones exploited the most were clearly Xiaolan's family. Xia Dejun willingly acted as the old ox. But Xiaolan felt indignant for Lu Fen. When my dad comes back, let's see who he chooses, his niece or his daughter. Xiaolan didn't know if Xia Dejun had heard about her hitting the pillar. That man always had to come back after finishing work. Xiaolan decided to give the original owner's father another chance. Lu Fen sounded uneasy, afraid Xiaolan would confront her dad. Your dad, of course, dotes on you. Your cousin is. Xiaolan smiled. Lu Fen lost confidence in her own words. It was common in the countryside for fathers to dote on nephews more than daughters. But uncles doting on nieces more than their own daughters were rarely seen. Xia Dejun truly disliked Xiaolan because giving birth to her had damaged Lu Fen's health and she couldn't have more children. Xia Dejun blamed it on his daughter. Mother and daughter fell silent. Xiaolan looked at the rundown house. I'll go gather some firewood. She also wanted to observe Day Village and see where she could make some money. Penniless, she had no leverage. Even the best plans couldn't be implemented without money. Day Village was very poor. Of course, in 1983, nowhere in the country had two non-impoverished villages. Poverty was deeply ingrained due to geographical environment and historical legacy. It was also era limitation. Digging food out of the earth, it was already good to fill your stomach. At sunset, there were a few women washing clothes by the river. As its name suggested, a big river flowed past Day Village. In terms of resources, the fish in the river should belong to no one. Catching them could earn money. Village people didn't dare go to the city to sell fish. The fish were natural produce, but this section of the river belonged to the village. It was collective property of the villagers. Occasionally catching some fish for a snack was fine, but selling them was not allowed. Xiaolan had no psychological burden with secretly catching and selling fish. Her and Lu Fen's only property was those 20 jin of sweet potatoes. They would starve if they talked about moral integrity. Unfortunately, she had no tools, nor the skills to catch fish barehanded. The banks on both sides of the river were overgrown with tall and thick reeds. If it was May, Xiaolan might have been able to pluck some reed leaves to sell to city people for wrapping zongzi. But now the Dragon Boat Festival had long passed. These were not in dire demand. She couldn't earn hard-won money from them. Weaving straw mats or baskets to sell? In the original owner's memory, many Day Village people had these skills. During slack seasons, every household would weave some straw mats and baskets. These definitely wouldn't sell for a good price in the countryside. They also lacked competitiveness in the city. Nowadays people weren't interested in handicrafts. City people sought agricultural products like meat, eggs, milk. Xiaolan gazed at the river lost in thought. Could she, having reached corporate executive status, starve to death in 1983? To break from the Xia family, she had to be able to feed herself and Lu Fen. Before the 20 jin of sweet potatoes were finished, she needed some seed money. The countryside was hopeless. She had to go to the city to seek opportunities. Commodity circulation could bring benefits. Country folk had no margins, besides some industrial products like matches, soap and fertilizer. Rural people in 1983 could be completely self-sufficient. The few women by the river pointed fingers at Xiaolan. Xiaolan thought about ways to make a living while gathering dry branches by the river. She didn't want to waste energy arguing with those gossipy women. She walked further to the reed marsh by the cattle shed. The smelly place was avoided by villagers cutting reeds. After going deeper for a few steps, 2 wild ducks flew out of the reed thicket, flapping their wings while quacking, seeming to lure Xiaolan to chase them. Xiaolan's eyes lit up. How could she be fooled by 2 wild ducks? This was a feint. Sure enough, when she carefully searched the reed marsh, she discovered a hidden duck's nest. Inside the soft grass nest were a pile of greenish duck eggs. Xia the executive, who had signed billions worth of contracts, grinned foolishly at the wild duck eggs. She picked them up one by one and held them up to the light. They were all fresh unincubated eggs. 12 in total. The saying went, rely on the mountain to eat its produce, rely on the water to eat its produce. Relying on these reed marshes by the river beach, she would definitely survive 1983. Resisting the urge to continue ravaging the reed marsh, she carried the 12 wild duck eggs while holding a bundle of dry branches back to the rundown shack. Mom, let's roast some sweet potatoes. It was only with a full stomach that they'd have the energy to work. Chapter 5: Selling duck eggs in the county town. 20 gin of sweet potatoes was enough for 2 people to eat for just a few days. This year's new grain had not yet arrived. When Xia Dejun comes back, he would definitely ask Lu Fen to go back. But would the Xia family forgive Xiaolan? Lu Fen was thinking that the next day she would go back to her parents' home to think of something. Her family was also poor, but Xiaolan's uncle was generous despite being poor. He definitely wouldn't watch his niece starve to death. Just as she was thinking, Xiaolan came back holding a bunch of dry branches, eyes bright, saying she wanted to eat roasted sweet potatoes. Seeing her good spirits, Lu Fen was willing to endure any hardship. Okay, Mom will roast sweet potatoes for you to eat. But she saw Xiaolan push away the firewood, revealing wild duck eggs. Lu Fen was also quite happy. Wild duck eggs were about the same size as chicken eggs, clearly picked up in the reed marsh. With these duck eggs, Xiaolan could nourish her body. She was so thin that the wind could blow her over. Lu Fen felt pained. I'll cook the duck eggs for you too. The rundown house had no cookware. Country folk weren't picky. Using a porcelain pot to cook eggs was definitely doable. But Xiaolan stopped her mother. Don't eat the duck eggs now. Our good days lie with these wild duck eggs. The villagers are preoccupied with the grain in the fields right now and have no time to cut reeds yet. I want to find more wild duck eggs to take to the city to sell. Let's go to the reed marsh tonight and try to catch a couple wild ducks too. Lu Fen had never done this before. When the Xia family lived together, the eggs collected were taken to the city to sell by her mother-in-law and sisters-in-law. From Day Village to the county seat took 2 hours. Usually people wouldn't go to the city for no reason. But Xiaolan was eloquent and Lu Fen couldn't win over her daughter. She also tended to obey. She couldn't find any rebuttals. Mother and daughter each ate a sweet potato. Lu Fen thought that to go to the city to sell duck eggs, they would need at least 2 baskets. She went out and got some reed stalks, and Lu Fen wove in 2 small baskets. Without any tools or soaking, they will definitely break within a month. Lu Fen pressed the reed baskets underwater with rocks to soak them. She was still somewhat disdainful of her own craftsmanship. Xiaolan already felt they were pieces of handicraft. After all, neither of the two Xiaolans knew how to make this stuff. Mother and daughter were going to steal eggs at night. After weaving the baskets, they hurried to sleep. The door was blocked with wood instead of locked. There was no bed in the house. Xiaolan spread clean reed stalks on the ground. Fortunately, it was August now. Otherwise, the drafty old shack would have made them sick. Without an alarm clock, with things on their mind, they didn't sleep for long before Xiaolan was awakened by rustling sounds. It turned out Lu Fen had already salvaged the reed baskets from the river. Sleep a while longer. Mom will go look first. Reed leaves cut into human skin were painfully hot. If not for the duck eggs there, how could no one have picked them up? It was arduous work. Lu Fen didn't want her daughter to suffer. The original Xiaolan was tender and delicate and hadn't done much farm work. Xiaolan shook her head. Let's go together. Two people searching was faster and safer. They didn't even have a flashlight, only the moonlight to see by. Fortunately, tonight's moonlight was bright. Tomorrow would surely be sunny too. Mother and daughter carried the small baskets, going to more secluded areas to look. Wherever there was a reed marsh, wild ducks would be frightened flying. Finally finding a duck's nest, it would be empty. When they found the first nest of eggs, they startled the dog at the cattle shed. The lonely old Wang, who watched the cattle shed, was very alert. Who's there? The flashlight shone twice. Lu Fen hid Xiaolan behind her, extremely shameful. Uncle, it's me, gathering some duck eggs for the child to nourish her. From the Xia family? Old Wang saw the mother and daughter's heads were full of grass clippings. News of Xiaolan being driven from home was known across Day Village. Old Wang also didn't like Xiaolan much. Even disregarding her unconventional behavior, this young lady didn't address elders. Though Lu Fen was quite pitiful. Xiaolan's forehead was wrapped in blood-stained gauze. Old Wang thought for a bit, then handed Lu Fen his flashlight. Return it to me tomorrow. Lu Fen's eyes immediately reddened in gratitude. Xiaolan thought, not everyone in Day Village was a bastard. She was also very sincere. Thank you, Grandpa Wang. Old Wang was a bit surprised. He looked at Xiaolan once, then led his dog back to the cattle shed, no longer minding the mother and daughter's business. With the help of the flashlight, the duck nests in this area suffered misfortune. Mother and daughter Xia walked for a few hours, gathering 70 to 80 wild duck eggs stored in 2 reed baskets. Lu Fen was still somewhat dumbfounded. Aside from the duck eggs, they also found a nest of hatched ducklings. They can be raised. Their down was fully grown. Lu Fen was quite happy. Xiaolan thought of that shack unguarded from petty thieves. She shook her head, no saying who it would benefit once they grow up. Sell them together. Lu Fen was a bit reluctant. But she and Xiaolan having enough to eat was a problem itself. Raising a few wild ducks would be too eye-catching. The two went back home and checked each egg. Plus the 12 Xiaolan had gathered before, there was a total of 82 unincubated ones. They set off for the city before it was light. Xiaolan dug out 2 sweet potatoes from the ashes. It was provisions for the mother and daughter. Eating roasted sweet potatoes was novel and gave a feeling of the wild for the first meal. After 2 consecutive meals, Xiaolan no longer enjoyed it. Fortunately, she had endured much hardship since little. Dropped into these circumstances, she could still persevere. If it was a white rich beauty transported here, she'd have been driven mad the first day. Surviving this era and living on would allow hoping for a better life. Holding this belief, Xiaolan rushed on the road heads down. By the time they reached the county seat, the sky had just brightened. Day Village was poor, but Qing'an County had some economic foundation. The county had a large meat processing plant and machinery factory that provided for many workers. The cows raised in Day Village's cattle shed were to be sold to the meat processing plant. Even the meat factory workers could occasionally get some meat. Eggs were hard to buy. The surrounding towns and villages of Qing'an County raised many pigs and cows, but few poultry. Where do we sell? Qing'an County had two big factories. The workers had money, and the black market revolved around these two factories. The meat factory was more profitable. Workers had money in their pockets. According to Lu Fan, they should go sell beside the meat factory. But Xiaolan did the opposite. Let's go check out the machinery factory area. The machinery factory had more workers. Xiaolan was slightly more familiar with this kind of factory. By the time they reached the machinery factory, the sky had brightened. Factory workers rode bicycles. Xiaolan saw some people by the roadside also holding things. They were competitors. How nice, some carrying chickens, some with newly dug sweet potatoes. Today there were no competitors selling eggs. They had just found a spot when an auntie holding a vegetable basket came over. Selling chicken eggs? Xiaolan didn't pretend to be mysterious. They're wild duck eggs, all fresh. If you like them, I'll sell them cheaper than chicken eggs to you. Wild duck eggs were the same size as chicken eggs, but cheaper. Who cared about the texture? The state-set price of chicken eggs was 1.2 yuan per gene. It also required food tickets. Farmer-sold eggs didn't require tickets, just 1.5 yuan. Xiaolan had just asked around. Chatty and polite, a sweet mouth, no one treated the selling price as a secret recipe. Seeing the auntie wasn't leaving, she was clearly interested. Xiaolan knew what to do. For 10 or less, I'll calculate 1.3 mao each, above 10 is 1.2 mao each, above 20 is 1 mao each. Her tiered promotion price left the auntie somewhat dumbfounded. Only an idiot let a bargain pass. Though originally wanting to buy a few, the auntie took out money and bought 21. The auntie's life wisdom was impressive. She occupied the bargain but didn't actually lose her head. Xiaolan received 2.3 yuan, even omitting the 1 mao change. She handed the money to Lu Fen. Lu Fen hadn't snapped out of it yet. The other vendors around were also watching Xiaolan. Though dressed coquettishly, she was actually very capable in speech and conduct.